If you're working in AI governance or trying to break into AI governance, you're going to encounter research constantly. Frameworks reference it and regulations also cite it. When you can actually read a research paper, understand what it says, and explain what it means, you stand out a little more. Now, I already know what you're going to be saying. Some of you are thinking that already. Who has the time to read research papers? That's a fair question. But you don't need an hour. You need 30 minutes and a method. That's what I'm going to show you today. Hi, everyone. My name is Obi. I help professionals transition into AI governance careers. And in this video, I am going to walk through how to read a research paper step by step using a real peer-reviewed study as our example, so that by the end of this video, you'll have a method that you can use on any paper that you come across. Now, before we get into the how, I want to spend a little time talking more about the why. Yes, I am an academic, and sometimes I default to that, but this one really isn't one of those times. This is a career skill that I think everyone who is in the governance space should learn. And let me talk about what I mean. First, research is the foundation of all the frameworks that you see and you use and you talk about daily. The NIST AI Risk Management Framework didn't appear from thin air. The EU AI Act didn't also get drafted in a vacuum. These were informed by years of academic research on AI risk, on fairness, on transparency, and accountability. So when you understand the research behind those frameworks that you read, you will have a more, or should I say, a deeper understanding than someone who just tries to memorize the categories. Secondly, it makes you more credible. There's a difference between saying, I think we should use AI risk assessments this way, than saying 2025 systematic review in the Journal of Strategic Information Systems found that most organizations struggle to operationalize responsible AI principles. And here's what that means for our approach. Now, the former argument is just an opinion, and the other one, the latter one, is an informed recommendation. Now, guess who your leadership will take more seriously? The third is that it protects you from bad information. There's a lot of noise in the AI space right now. There are vendor white papers that cherry pick the data that they report. There's blog posts that overclaim. There's also LinkedIn posts that could sometimes misrepresent some findings. If you can't evaluate a source, you'll be at the mercy of someone who is summarizing it for you. So reading research yourself is how you develop an independent and an informed perspective. And that's what makes you a lot more valuable. So now that you understand why reading research matters, let's talk about what type of papers you should actually be reading. Why does it matter the types of papers in the journals that you should be reading? It's because not all research is created equal. Let me define what peer review means. It is a quality control process. So before a paper gets published in an academic journal, it gets sent to experts in that particular field. Those experts will evaluate that research study. And by the way, these experts are typically anonymous. They check the methodology, they question the conclusions, they look for errors and biases and maybe even gaps. Very often, they send the paper back multiple times with demands for revisions. I know that because I've been on the receiving end of it. In fact, I've been on both sides of the table as a reviewer and as an author in one of those papers. And only after this rigorous process does the paper even get published. And sometimes that process can take months. It could take a year. It could even take multiple years if it's a top journal. I've had a research study myself that went through 5 revisions spanning 2 years. Now, that was painful, but that's beside the point. The process is there to ensure that researchers are not publishing rubbish. So that's why it's important. Why does all this matter? It matters because non-peer-reviewed work, like preprints, like blog posts, like white papers, or even think tank reports, These haven't been through these types of vetting processes. Now, that doesn't mean that those types of reports are wrong. I create blog posts myself, but it means that there hasn't been an independent verification of the claims made in those reports and in those papers. Now, in a fast-moving field like AI, you will see a lot of preprints on archive. These can be valuable for seeing cutting-edge research work, but when you're building an argument, writing a policy, or citing research in a professional context, peer-reviewed sources should be your foundation. They're not perfect. Peer review has its own limitations, but they represent the best quality control that we have in academic research. When you're looking at a piece of research, always check for a few things. Was this research published in a peer-reviewed journal? You can usually tell by looking at the journal name. You can see the volume number. You can see the DOI, that's the Digital Object Identifier, which is a permanent link to the published version of that research. All right, so for this video, we're going to use a real paper, not a hypothetical paper, an actual study that has been published. The title of the paper is Responsible Artificial Intelligence Governance, a Review and Research Framework. It's by Papagiannidis, Mikalef, and Conboy. It was published in 2025 in the Journal of Strategic Information Systems. Now, and I chose this paper for several reasons. One, it's peer-reviewed, and it's published in a respected information systems journal. Second, it's open access, which means that it is free. You can find it, and I'll put the link in the description below. Third is that it's directly relevant to AI governance. The research talks about the kind of work that many of you are trying to move into. Number four is that it's a literature review paper. Now, review papers are a good place to start if you're learning a new field. A review paper synthesizes the existing research on a particular subject and gives you the landscape. What's been studied, what's been found, and where the gaps are. Before we read the specific paper, let's talk about the structure. Most research studies follow a standard format. Once you understand this structure, every reading of a research paper becomes easier to work through. Think of the structure of a paper like you would think of the structure of a house, for instance, or a large building. Once you know where the rooms are, you know where the living room is, you know where the kitchen is, the bathrooms, and so on and so forth, you won't be lost wandering and trying to figure out where things are. You'd already know where things are. You just go straight to it. So let's start with this paper. It starts with a title and an abstract. The title tells you the topic. The abstract gives you the summary of the entire paper, which includes the objective of the paper, the method that they followed, any key findings that they found. If you only have 2 minutes to dedicate to reading a research, just read that abstract. Then we have the introduction. The introduction is what sets up the problem. It tells you what the research is about. It tells you why the research matters and what gaps in knowledge that the paper is addressing. It tells you what the research questions are. And then there's the literature review. The literature review is where the authors summarize existing research on that topic. It essentially gives you a curated listing of studies in that area. Then we have methodology. Methodology tells you how the researchers actually conducted the study, what data they used, how they analyzed the study. And I think this is where many people get intimidated because this is where all the statistical analysis reside. The paper that we're going to review today does not have it. However, in many other papers, this is where you will see those charts, those statistical charts and things. Now, if you encounter those in any paper, you don't need to understand statistical techniques to be able to read the paper. Just focus on what they did and whether it makes sense for the question that they're trying to answer. This is where you find what they discovered. So you're looking for the main findings first. You're looking for tables. You're looking for figures that will tell you the story clearly than the text. So I love these because when I'm reading a research paper, I'm always looking for figures, I'm looking for tables, I'm looking for something that can tell me the story really quickly without having to read the text. So this is what I do. Then we go into the discussion. This is where the authors interpret the findings. This is where you will find their own interpretation of what they found. So what does the result mean? What they found with the existing research? Then we come to the conclusion. This is a summary of the contributions and suggestions for future research. And then you have the references. This is where they cite all the sources that they used in the study. So the part that you should pay attention to when you're reading research is that you should not read a research paper from start to finish, at least not at your first attempt. Instead, use what we call the 3-pass method. This is how researchers actually read papers. That's how I read papers. And it's the reason I said earlier that you need 10 minutes and not an hour. The pass 1 is where you skim for 5 to 10 minutes. You read the title, abstract, and introduction. You read the section headings, read the conclusion, look at the figures and the tables, and that's it. Don't read the methodology. Don't read the literature review, at least not yet. After this pass, you should be able to answer 3 questions. What is this paper about? What type of paper is it? Is it relevant to what you're trying to do or trying to find? If the answer is no to the last question, then you saved yourself hours. Just move on to the next one. You don't need to spend any time there. This is why the 3-pass method works. Most papers you will encounter won't be relevant to you. The skim is how you filter through these papers fast. Now, pass 2 is what I call the focused read. You spend about 30 to 60 minutes here if this is really what you want to read about. If that first pass works for you, then this is where you spend the majority of your time. Now, this is where you decided this paper is worth your time. You read the full paper, but don't get stuck on the details that you don't understand. Highlight or note 3 things. The research question, what are they trying to answer? The methodology, how did they do it? Then the key findings, what did they discover? If there's a section you don't fully understand, for example, statistical methods, some technical framework, mark it and just move on. You can come back to it later if you want to, but no sense spending time reading something that you really don't understand. Now, the 3rd pass is a critical read. This is where you engage deeply with the paper. You question the assumptions, you evaluate that methodology, and you consider the limitations. Think about how you might apply or cite this research in your own work. So not every paper needs a 3rd pass, but the ones that are really relevant to your work, those papers deserve it. In the next video, I will walk you through the exact method on a real 2025 paper and give you the 6 questions that separate informed professionals from people who just nod along. So subscribe so that you don't miss it.